Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come here today. As it turns out, thanks, sir, for a wonderful presentation. And it allows me to remark that yesterday I was with yet another PhD economist, real estate economist, at a session for the City Club of New York. And according to that PhD economist, none of what you've just heard is true. None of it. But I'm not a PhD economist, so I'm not qualified to say that. What I am qualified to talk about is, I'm not a theoretical economist, but I am an empiricist. My work has been largely looking at the world as it is and trying to distill out from the world as it is the rules underlying it. I think that's different than kind of theoretical economics, which starts from a set of theoretical models and puts those models out there to form a predictive possibility against a counter reality, which is also an invented aspect of it. Now, this is not a criticism of what you just heard. I just want you to know that this is very debatable. All of what we're saying now is very debatable. I'm going to take the position here today that all of what Sir said was actually true. And in the future, if you threw away planning and just said the market gets to do whatever the market wants to do, if in fact you deregulate the entire planning structure that has created these cities in the first place, if you just basically eliminate it, and let us not forget that 80% of the land, of the occupied land area of any city like Calgary is housing. So when you basically deregulate housing, you deregulate 80% of what goes on in a city. So let's just say that was true. Let's say that is all true. What we're looking at in the model is a possible 15% decrease from what would otherwise be an increasingly unaffordable product. So you have a 15% less unaffordable, which is still unaffordable. And to get at that, you have deregulated everything. Back to your comment, and many other aspects of what this city and other cities have determined was important to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizenry. That's the fundamental purpose of planning, as I was always taught, is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizenry. And in that respect, I think this question of, upzoning everything in sight is a fundamentally political question, or if you prefer it, a civic question. A question for citizens to come to grips with. And that, of course, includes social equity, which is what's on the table for us today. The motivation for all of this discussion, including what has happened in the province of BC, is because we're all severely impacted or worried. We're either directly impacted or very worried for our children and grandchildren and the people who make our city run, that they can no longer afford to live in this city. So it's the question that's before us is fundamentally one of equity, social equity, and the planning structures have always had as a fundamental purpose some degree of social equity. There were cases in the American past where zoning was used to exclude certain minorities, and that was tragic. But in general, zoning has been used as a means by which to create a better future for the citizenry. You know, to imagine a vision of the future that satisfied a lot of conditions. Access for people who have mobility challenges, on the one hand, for the elderly on the other hand, in terms of clean air on the third hand, and finally and currently most importantly, the question of can the average wage earner afford to live in this city? And if not, what kind of city is it? All right. So, you know, I'll go forward and assume that would produce 15% lower than the incredibly overpriced price for housing that exists right now. I'll go ahead and accept that, even though even that is challengeable, and wonder whether or not that's the right thing for Calgary or any other place in North America, and indeed in the English-speaking world, to do. What is before City Council here in the city of Calgary now is just your local example of something that's happening throughout Canada, throughout the United States, California and particularly Massachusetts, where I'm from, New Zealand, Australia, the United Kingdom, are all taking the position that the solution to this global housing crisis, it's not a Calgary crisis, it's a global housing crisis, is to throw away planning and let the market run rampant across our neighborhoods. I mean, that might sound too strong, but that is basically what was stated. And I was glad that the question came up about regulation, and I agree with that answer that what was shown is just if you only want a slightly more efficient system of delivering housing, then that would be the answer. So thank you for that statement, but that's certainly not all we want in our city. Could you get me some water? Or anybody, some water? So anyway, if you want more of that harangue, you can buy the book Broken City, which is coming out on May 28th. Pre-orders are accepted. And the book basically tells you the answer to this. The reason why housing costs too much, it's not because the building costs too much, it's because the land under the building costs too much. You know, given average incomes, if land was free, you could build a rental unit that would be affordable, and you could get a 2- and 3-bedroom unit for $1,500 a month, which is generally affordable for people making average salaries and below. The reason why that doesn't happen is because land costs too much. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. As I said, I'm an empiricist. So I've looked at Vancouver for 30 plus years now. And during that 30 plus years as a planner and as an academic and as an outreach person who helped, for example, the city of Surrey build a lot of new projects out there that were based on sustainable principles. Thanks, you're a lifesaver. And at the beginning of my career out there, I firmly believed, because it's very obvious, right? If you want things to be more affordable, you just put more of them out there. So all of my projects in the past were encouraging adding density, or if it was a greenfield site, making sure that there was a variety of house types and that the average density in that area was much higher than the typical suburban sprawl. And the outcome of that was intended to be, among other things, walkability, transit orientation, green infrastructure. Among a lot of other things, housing affordability was an assumed outcome. What I did not anticipate was that in the midst of that 30 years, we would somehow end up in a situation where, despite all of our best efforts to add density, in Vancouver, why didn't adding tons of new density to existing neighborhoods lead to affordability like we thought it would? It's not generally recognized around the world sufficiently that the city of Vancouver is North America's only example. It's the city of Vancouver is North America's best example of a center city in a region adding density. So after adding 300% or tripling the number of housing units in the city of Vancouver, why didn't that lead to affordability? We tripled the number of housing units, but somehow it now takes 29 years to save up for a down payment. What you're looking at there is the blue line is the number of years that it would take the average wage earner. All of this is based on average wages, and all of this is inflation adjusted. So it shows you what has happened in Vancouver since the 1980s, which correlates with the period in Vancouver where Vancouver became famous for adding density, not just in its downtown, in a strategy that became called Vancouverism around the world, but also in the neighborhoods. We've had the city of Vancouver, and I and others were strongly supporting this, has had secondary suites legalized for a couple of decades illegally. They were tolerated for 50 years before that. Legal lane houses, legal duplexing, such that the lowest allowable density in the city of Vancouver is 4 dwelling units per acre, 4 dwelling units per lot. The lots are 3,500 square feet. That's 45 dwelling units per acre. That's townhouse density for the whole city, the so-called single-family areas. We've done all that since the 1980s, and what has been our reward? Our reward is increasing gap between the ability of the wage earners in Brown to participate in gaining access to that equity. So we added supply to fix it. We tripled the housing units of the city since 1970. We doubled the population from 384,000 to 662,000 in that same period. We went from 109,000 housing units to 315,000 in 2021. Housing units tripled, all through infill or change of land use. This is not greenfield development. This is the transformation of former industrial areas for some of it, but the bulk of it was a transformation of existing parcels in some use to a higher density use. Just to give you an idea, I mean, places like New York have only increased like 30% in population in that same period. Nothing exists remotely like this. So if adding new density, new supply brought down prices, Vancouver should have the cheapest housing in North America. It has the most expensive housing in North America. And of course, the question is why? The presentation that started off our day, which I'm very grateful for, talked about a lot of factors, but one factor that was only touched on, and I appreciate that land price residual was said, and the price of land came up, but it wasn't emphasized. I will emphasize land. This is what I observe empirically has happened in the city of Vancouver, which explains from a different angle why tripling of housing units has not led to affordability. On the left is a typical single-family lot. Before rezoning, land price, let's say it's $1 million to keep the math simple, per square foot interior price set by the market is $1,000 per square foot. After rezoning, land price goes up to $4 million per square foot, interior price stays at $1,000. So what this simple diagram is trying to show you is the market is setting the market price for the housing at $1,000 a square foot. That doesn't change when you add density. What does change is land value. Now, this slide is important because it essentially empirically proves that the hypothesis, well, I have to explain it in more detail. What this is showing you is land price in the blue line and building price in the green line. This is from assessors' records, which fortunately British Columbia assessment records are structured in a way that allow a separation of the value of the building from the value of the land. And what you see clearly in these two examples is outrageous increase in land value. So we have a land value problem. We don't really have an affordable building problem because our developers are capable of putting up a building and have been for inflation adjusted about $300 per square foot, like forever. And why I'm giving you two to look at the same time is the one on the top is a single family home. Look at the ratio between the land price and the building price there. And then go down and see a much higher density building, in this case along Broadway. But, whoa, you would think that a higher density building would be more valuable relative to the land value, but no. The land value accelerates proportionately the same way, irregardless of the density, apparently. So, oh God, then what are we going to do about this land problem? Well, you know, the funny thing is Vancouver actually figured this out a long time ago. They basically, when they did the incredible work to create this thing called Vancouverism that made the city world famous, the strategy included a way to shift that land value towards public benefit. What can be done? Capture land lift for social benefit to finance the public realm in this case. Bit of technical policy information. When the downtown was redeveloped in the fashion that you see in this photograph, the deal made with the landowners was that we will upzone you from, in technical terms, you know, maybe an FSR 2 to an FSR 5, 6, 7, massive increase in new allowed density. What the city said to the landowners and their partners, the developers, sometimes that was the same entity, often it was. What they said was, look, your land is worth $1 million now at existing zoning, but we're basically thinking of changing this whole area, and we're going to let you put a 30-story building up there. And the landowner will say, oh, great, good, that's wonderful. I'm going to make a lot of money. They said, well, wait a minute. There's this thing called land lift. When we do this, there's going to be a massive increase in the value of your land. So the deal is we want to take 80% of that new value above existing zoning, and we will use that for social benefit. You will still double the value of your land because it goes from, the sale price will eventually be going from, let's say, from $1 million to $2 million, but the city will get $8 million. Of course, the $8 million doesn't come until the end of the deal after the condos are sold, so there's some fancy financing to bridge that money, but the money eventually comes out of the value of the new condominiums here. So with this device, the city of Vancouver used land lift to create community centers, capturing 80% of rezoned land values for social infrastructure, and most importantly, captured 80% of rezoned land value and used some of it, although not enough, for non-market housing. Now, the key point here is that the non-market housing and the parks and all this other stuff, community centers, did not come out of the taxpayers' pocket, not from income tax, not even from existing property tax. It came entirely out of land lift, or the new value that the city had created. So I suggest that a better strategy, if you're really looking for affordability, the model has already been demonstrated in Canada, and it works quite well. In the context, if you're going to upzone the whole city, first of all, you should do it more intelligently than just say, let the market go and do what it will, but also do it in a way where you're strategic in this way about capturing land lift and using that land lift for the social benefit. And the most important social benefit we need right now is non-market affordable housing for 30-year-olds, service workers, our sons, our daughters. And the market is not capable of providing that housing, but the market can be leveraged in the way that this example suggests to provide money through capturing land lift. So one more thing, an American example that is a different version of the same thing. Cambridge, Massachusetts did this thing called the Affordable Housing Overlay. They said you can double density throughout the whole city. It doesn't matter where. If it's a detached neighborhood of detached buildings, then the new buildings will be detached, but they'll be twice the existing density. But you can only do that if you agree to make this housing 100% affordable to people making, for people making the median household income of the region, permanently pegged to an affordability number which is grounded in incomes, not in how many assets your mom and dad has to throw at you from the bank of mom and dad, which is really what's going on now. The rent's permanently pegged to median incomes. And the nice thing about this is because it controls land lift, because it controls land price inflation, because a doubling of density would have otherwise doubled the land price, because the land price residual, quote, would have doubled as a consequence. That land price residual does not double the requirement that it be affordable means that when the deal is penciled out and when the nonprofit developer figures out how to build this building and what the rents are going to be from people who are able to pay $1,500 to $2,000 a month or something like that, when it's all penciled out, the nonprofit developer can say to that landowner, well, I can only afford $2 million for this land. And the landowner can say, what, are you kidding me? Your project is double the density. And the nonprofit developer can say, yes, but I can only afford $2 million. So if you want to sell that to the market, go right ahead. The market price for that land is $2 million. The thing that's not well understood about all of this is that cities take a long time to turn over. So a lot of the argument against what's being said here by me is that, well, we have a crisis, we need to stimulate the housing market. But the housing market is very resistant to stimulus, but on the other hand, there are going to be parcel turnovers, a certain percentage per year, such that over the course of 30 or 40 years, which is the time span that this stuff takes. I mean, imagine, look out the window. 30 years ago, very different place. So cities take a long time to change. During that multi-decade process, every year there will be parcels that will change. So the argument that this will a civic requirement to capture the land lift will slow down development is not borne out by reality. Last slide. Design matters. You have a situation here which is, it's kind of a clown car of political disruption going on, which I've been following in your city hall, but I guess it's about a block away from here. Never seen anything so badly managed in my life to turn a city so against itself over the issue of housing and how to create affordable housing. Again, I'll say it yet again, the model that is that citizens are upset about is a model that at best will give you 15% somewhat more affordable, somewhat less unaffordable than trend at best. And I think the citizens, many of them are right to say that's not really a good idea. But in the case of Cambridge, Massachusetts, the strategy that they took was to go out, and it took 4 years, not 4 months. It took 4 years to go out into the community and to separately design different strategies, formal strategies. These are pictures that they drew 4 years before the council finally voted on the project. And there was a lot of concern in those neighborhoods, of course, because people don't trust government. So there was a lot of concern. But eventually the concern was ameliorated, and the reason why it was ameliorated was the city eventually convinced the different neighborhood groups that this was not going to be housing that nobody can afford in my neighborhood, but this was going to be housing that would be affordable, again, to our sons, our daughters, our service workers who are necessary to make this place run, most of whom are in the age cohort between like the age of 20 and the age of 40. Right now, that's where the crisis exists. So here's the bottom line. Don't just upzone hoping for affordability when you can insist on it. You can insist on it. Cambridge has insisted on it. The city of Vancouver had a tradition of insisting on social benefit as a condition for upzoning. Why are we all of a sudden deciding that, oh, well, you know, that money should go to the land speculators? You know, we're just going to open up the market in a way that benefits the land speculators to the disadvantage of basically our citizens and our children. It doesn't make sense to me. So I think there are policy solutions, and the ones that I've suggested don't need to reach into the taxpayer's pocket for additional funding, but rather the money rightfully comes out of the increased value of land. That increased value of land is a consequence of our civic decisions. Thank you.